At the funeral home, my brother shouted, "You better give me half of Dad's estate." Then punched me so hard I fell that I stood up, called my lawyer, and removed him from the will entirely with witnesses present. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, say hello below, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support truly means everything. Let's continue. The funeral home smelled like lilies and lies. I stood beside my father's casket, my hand trembling as I adjusted the American flag draped across the polished mahogany. Daddy looked peaceful finally, after 6 months of watching cancer devour him from the inside out. I'd been there every single day, every chemo session, every hospital stay, every 3 a.m. panic attack when he couldn't breathe. "You did good, baby girl," my Aunt Carol whispered, squeezing my shoulder. She was the only one who knew what these last months had cost me. My job, my savings, my relationship with Samuel, who couldn't handle all this death stuff. But Daddy needed me, and I'd promised Mama before she passed that I'd take care of him. The viewing room was filling up. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Church members. Daddy's old work buddies. And then I heard it, that familiar voice that made my stomach clench. My brother Terrence walked in like he owned the place, designer suit crisp, gold watch catching the light. Behind him was his wife Shanice, her face twisted in that fake sympathy she'd perfected. Terrence hadn't visited Daddy once during his illness. Not once. When I called to tell him Daddy had maybe weeks left, he said he was too busy closing a deal. When Daddy asked for him on his deathbed, whispering, "Where's my boy?" I had to lie and say he was coming soon. Now here he was, playing the grieving son for an audience. My jaw clenched as he approached the casket, touching it like he had any right. "Sister," Terrence said, his voice dripping with false warmth as he pulled me into a hug I didn't return. "How you holding up?" Up close I could smell his expensive cologne, the kind that cost more than Daddy's monthly medication had. My hands balled into fists at my sides. "I'm managing," I said coldly, stepping back. "Where were you, Terrence? These last 6 months, where the hell were you?" His jaw tightened. Around us, people pretended not to listen, but I felt their eyes. Shanice grabbed his arm, whispering something, but he shook her off. "Don't start this here, Constance. Not at Daddy's funeral. I had responsibilities. My business. Your business." The words came out sharp, cutting. "Daddy was dying and you had business? I called you 37 times. 37. My voice cracked despite my resolve. Aunt Carol moved closer, protective. Terrence's expression shifted. Something cold flickered across his face. "We'll talk about this later. After we handle Daddy's affairs." The way he said affairs made my skin crawl. He wasn't here to mourn. He was here for something else. "There's nothing to handle," I said quietly. "Everything's arranged. The burial plot next to Mama, the repast at the church." "That's not what I mean." He glanced toward the hallway away from the crowd. "We need to discuss the house. The life insurance. His accounts." He lowered his voice. "The will." There was. My stomach dropped as understanding crashed over me like ice water. He wasn't here to say goodbye to Daddy. He was here to collect. My brother had shown up to our father's funeral with his hand already out, calculating his inheritance before we'd even put Daddy in the ground. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in Daddy's house. My house now legally, though it didn't feel real, staring at old photo albums. There was Terrence at 8, gap-toothed and laughing, sitting on Daddy's shoulders at the 4th of July parade. Me at 6, pigtails flying as Daddy pushed us both on the tire swing he'd hung from the old oak tree. When did we stop being those kids? I traced the photo with my finger, remembering Daddy's deep laugh, the way he'd toss us in the air until Mama scolded him for getting us too worked up before bed. Back then, Terrence was my protector. He'd fought Tommy Crawford in 5th grade for pulling my hair. He taught me to ride a bike, running alongside until I found my balance. "Promise me you'll always look out for your sister," Daddy used to tell him. "Family's all we got." Terrence would nod solemnly, taking the responsibility seriously. When did that promise turn to dust? The change started in high school. Terrence fell in with a different crowd. Kids whose parents had money, who drove new cars and summered in places we couldn't afford. He became ashamed of our small house, of Daddy's factory job, of Mama's second-hand store dresses. He started lying about where he lived, making excuses why friends couldn't come over. When he got that scholarship to state, he barely came home. Then he met Shanice, her family owned car dealerships, and suddenly he was too good for us. Daddy never said it hurt him, but I saw how his face would fall when Terrence made excuses about why he couldn't visit. Mama cried quietly in the kitchen more than once. The funeral was beautiful. Daddy would have loved it. The church was packed, the choir sang his favorite hymns, and Pastor Kelly gave a sermon that had everyone in tears. I delivered the eulogy I'd written at 2 a.m., my voice breaking as I described the man who'd taught me strength, who'd worked double shifts so I could go to college, who'd loved us fiercely despite our flaws. Terrence sat in the front pew stone-faced. He hadn't offered to speak, hadn't helped plan anything, just showed up in his expensive suit and played the part. After the burial, after the repast where church ladies pressed Tupperware into my hands and promised to check on me, I finally made it back to the house. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, ready to collapse. Instead, I found Terrence's Mercedes in the driveway. He was sitting on the porch swing, Shanice beside him scrolling on her phone. "We need to talk," he said as I approached. "No greeting, no. How are you holding up?" "Just business." "I'm tired, Terrence. Can this wait?" "No." He stood blocking my path to the door. "Mr. Patterson called me." "Daddy's lawyer?" "Said the will reading is tomorrow at 2 p.m. I want to know what to expect." Something about his tone, aggressive and entitled, made me stop. I looked at him, really looked at him, at this stranger wearing my brother's face. "What do you mean, what to expect?" "Don't play stupid, Constance. The house, the insurance policy, his savings. I know Daddy had at least 100 grand in that policy. We need to discuss how we're splitting everything." The audacity stole my breath. "Splitting? Yeah. 50-50. I'm his son. I'm entitled to half." I stared at my brother, disbelief rendering me momentarily speechless. Entitled? The word tasted bitter. "You think you're entitled to Daddy's estate? You who didn't visit once. Who couldn't be bothered to return my calls when he was begging to see you." Terrence's jaw clenched. "I was building a life, providing for my family." "Providing?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "I provided for Daddy. I quit my job to take care of him. I moved back into this house, slept in that chair by his bed, changed his 4 bags, held the bucket when he vomited from chemo." My voice rose with each word. Shanice's eyes widened, but I didn't care anymore. "I spent my entire savings on co-pays and medications. I'm $43,000 in debt because insurance didn't cover everything, Terrence. Where the hell were you? That was your choice." "My choice?" The fury came sudden and complete. "It was my duty. The duty you abandoned. You're his son? Then act like it. You should have been here." I was shouting now, months of exhaustion and grief pouring out. "Every night he asked for you. Every single night. 'Where's my boy?' he'd say. And I'd lie because I couldn't break his heart by telling him his son didn't give a damn." Terrence stepped closer, his face reddening. "You don't know what I was dealing with." "I don't care." The words exploded from me. Daddy was dying and nothing should have mattered more than that. Nothing. Tears streamed down my face. "He loved you so much. He bragged about you constantly, his successful son. And you couldn't even give him a few hours of your precious time." Shanice touched Terrence's arm, nervous now. "Baby, maybe we should." He shook her off violently. "No. She needs to hear this." "Hear what, Terrence?" I wiped my eyes, standing my ground even as he loomed over me. I refused to be intimidated, not in Daddy's house. What could you possibly have to say that justifies abandoning your dying father? "He abandoned me first." The words burst from him, raw and angry. For a moment, I glimpsed something beneath his polished exterior, something hurt and festering. When I was building my business, when I needed help, where was he? I asked for a loan, just $20,000 to get started. He said no. Said I needed to do it myself, earn it the hard way like he did. I stared at him, comprehension dawning. "This is about money? You're punishing Daddy because he wouldn't bankroll your business. It's about respect. Terrence's voice cracked. He had the money. He just didn't believe in me enough to invest. But he gave you everything, paid your full ride through college while I had to take loans. Helped with your first apartment. Always made excuses for you when you struggled but expected me to be perfect. The accusation hung between us. For a moment I saw the truth he'd carried. The weight of being the eldest, the son, the one expected to succeed without help. But then I remembered Daddy lying in that hospital bed and my sympathy evaporated. He didn't pay my full ride. I had scholarships and worked 3 jobs. He helped when I was desperate, yes, because I asked humbly and proved I needed it. You demanded, Terrence. You expected it as your due. I moved closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. And even if you felt slighted, that doesn't excuse what you did. He was dying. The lawyer's office felt too formal, too cold for something this personal. Mr. Patterson, Daddy's attorney for 30 years, sat behind his mahogany desk, a folder open before him. Terrence and Shanice sat to my right, Aunt Carol to my left for moral support. The tension was suffocating. Thank you all for coming, Mr. Patterson began, his kind eyes settling on me with sympathy. I know this is difficult. Your father was a good man, and I'm honored he trusted me with his final wishes. Terrence shifted impatiently. I felt sick knowing what was coming. Daddy had told me months ago when it became clear he wasn't getting better. Don't tell your brother, he'd said, his voice weak. Let him think what he wants. But baby girl, you earned this. Mr. Patterson began reading. The legal language washed over me until I heard, to my daughter Constance Thompson, I leave my house at 427 Maple Street, all its contents, my life insurance policy valued at $125,000, my savings account, and my 1967 Mustang she always loved. The silence was deafening. I felt Terrence stiffen beside me, heard Shanice's sharp intake of breath. Mr. Patterson continued, to my son Terrence James Thompson, I leave my collection of vinyl records in my toolbox. Items I hope will remind him of better days when we worked on cars together. What? Terrence's voice was barely a whisper. Then louder, what the hell is this? Mr. Patterson's expression remained neutral. There's more. Your father included a letter. He pulled out an envelope, weathered and sealed. He asked that this be read aloud. Terrence stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is bullshit. He couldn't have been in his right mind. He was completely lucid, Mr. Patterson said firmly. I witnessed this will myself. The letter too. Mr. Patterson's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Daddy's handwriting filled the page, shaky near the end but unmistakably his. My throat tightened as the lawyer began to read. My dear Terrence, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I hope you're not too angry, but I suspect you are. Son, I loved you from the moment you were born. Held you in these hands and promised to teach you everything I knew. And I tried, boy. God knows I tried. Terrence's breathing was heavy beside me. Shanice grabbed his hand but he pulled away, staring at the wall. But somewhere along the way you learned the wrong lessons. You learned that money means more than family. That success is measured in dollars, not in the lives you touch or the people you help. When you asked for that loan, I said no because I wanted you to understand struggle, to build something with your own hands like I did. I wanted you to earn it so you'd appreciate it. A tear rolled down my cheek. Aunt Carol squeezed my hand. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I pushed you too hard. But son, when I got sick, I needed you. Not your money, not your success, just you. Your sister called you 37 times. She told me even though she thought she hadn't. I heard her begging you to visit. I heard the excuses. And it broke something in me. Terrence's face had gone pale, his jaw working soundlessly. Constance gave up everything for me. Her job, her savings, her future. She sat with me through every dark night, every moment of pain. She earned every penny I'm leaving her, not through blood but through love. I hope one day you understand that. I hope you learn what really matters before it's too late. I love you, son. I always will. Dad. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then Terrence erupted. This is garbage. He grabbed the letter from Mr. Patterson's hand, tearing it as he crushed it in his fist. He was manipulated. She poisoned him against me. Mr. Thompson, please. Mr. Patterson stood alarmed. No. Terence whirled on me, his face contorted with rage. You did this. You kept me away deliberately, filled his head with lies so you could steal everything. I stood too, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I did no such thing. Every word he wrote is true. You abandoned him, Terence. You can't rewrite history. I was building a life. Spittle flew from his mouth. I had responsibilities, a company to run. And he had cancer. I shouted back. He was dying and you chose money over him. That's on you. Not me. Not Daddy. You. Terence lunged toward me and Aunt Carol jumped up, positioning herself between us. That's enough, she commanded. Both of you, this isn't. Stay out of this, Carol, Terence snarled. Then to me, you're not keeping everything. I'll contest this will. I'll drag you through court. I'll prove you manipulated a sick, dying man. On what grounds? Mr. Patterson interjected, his voice sharp. I have medical records proving your father was mentally sound. I have documentation of every visit Miss Thompson made to this office, always at your father's request. I have. I don't care what you have. Terence's voice rose to a roar. She's not getting away with this. He grabbed Shanice's arm. We're going to another lawyer. A real one. As they stormed toward the door, Terence turned back, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, Constance. Not by a long shot. 3 days later, I returned to the funeral home to settle the final bill. I'd been avoiding it, dreading the final goodbye that pain would represent. Mrs. Austen, the funeral director, was kind and patient as she walked me through the itemized statement. Daddy had prepaid most of it, but there were additional charges. The flowers I'd ordered, the upgraded casket he deserved, the guest book and memorial cards. That comes to $3,200, she said gently. I can set up a payment plan if... No, I'll pay it now. I pulled out the credit card I'd just managed to pay down. What was more debt at this point? I'd figure it out. I always did. I was signing the receipt when the door burst open. Terence stormed in, Shanice trailing behind, looking uncomfortable. His eyes were wild, his expensive suit rumpled like he'd slept in it. There you are, he spat. I've been calling you for 3 days. I blocked your number. I kept my voice calm, though my heart hammered. Mrs. Austen looked alarmed, reaching for something beneath her desk, probably a panic button. We need to talk about Daddy's estate. He advanced on me and I could smell alcohol on his breath. It was 11 a.m. I'm not accepting this. You manipulated him, kept me away deliberately. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Austen interrupted, this isn't appropriate. If you don't lower your voice, I'll call security. Terence ignored her, his focus laser-sharp on me. You better give me half of Dad's estate, Constance. I'm entitled to it. I'm his son, his blood. You can't just cut me out. Daddy cut you out, I said quietly, standing my ground. Not me. Daddy made his choice based on your actions. Your absence. Your selfishness. His face purpled with rage. Selfishness? You're calling me selfish. Everything happened so fast. One moment, Terence was shouting, spittle flying from his mouth about his rights and my betrayal. The next, his fist was flying toward my face. I saw it coming but couldn't move fast enough. The impact exploded across my cheekbone, a starburst of pain that sent me stumbling backward. My hip hit the corner of Mrs. Austen's desk and then I was falling, the world tilting sideways. I hit the floor hard, my head bouncing off the carpet. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Shanice scream, Terence, no. Mrs. Austen was shouting into a phone, security. I need security now. And above it all, my brother's voice, still raging, you don't get to take everything. I deserve half. I deserve it. My vision swam as I pushed myself up on my elbows. Blood dripped from my nose onto the beige carpet, bright red spots expanding like blooming flowers. Terence stood over me, his chest heaving, his fist still clenched. For a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes, shock, maybe regret. but it disappeared beneath the rage. "You better give me half," he growled, "or I swear to God, Constance." That's when something inside me snapped. The fear, the pain, the months of exhaustion and grief, all of it crystallized into a single diamond-hard certainty. I'd had enough. Years of trying to keep the peace, of making excuses for him, of hoping my brother would come back to us. Done. Finished. He'd destroyed it all with one punch. I wiped the blood from my face and pulled out my phone with shaking hands. "Get away from me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My fingers found the contact I needed. "Right now, or I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare." I hit dial. "Watch me." The police arrived within minutes, along with my lawyer, Susan Martinez, who I'd called right after 911. Mrs. Austin had witnessed everything, as had her assistant who'd come running at the commotion. Security cameras had caught it all. Terrence bursting in, the argument, the punch, me falling. There was no ambiguity, no room for lies. "I want to press charges," I told the officers, an ice pack pressed to my swelling face. "For assault." Terrence's bravado crumbled as the officers approached him. "She provoked me," he stammered. "She stole my inheritance." "That's a civil matter," the older officer said flatly. "Assault is criminal. You need to come with us." As they handcuffed him, Shanice started crying, begging them to reconsider. I felt nothing watching my brother be led away. The man I'd once looked up to, once loved, was gone. Maybe had been gone for years, and I just refused to see it. Susan sat beside me, her expression grim. "We need to document everything," she said. "The injury, the witnesses, the camera footage. And Constance, I think we need to discuss something else." She pulled out her briefcase, extracted papers. "Your father's will has a specific clause I didn't mention at the reading. He anticipated potential challenges." I looked at her, confused through the pain. "What kind of clause?" "A no-contest clause. If any beneficiary challenges the will in court, they forfeit whatever they were left entirely. But there's more, he gave you the power to modify the bequests under specific circumstances." She met my eyes. "Including if Terrence ever physically harmed you. He was very specific about that. Almost like he knew." Tears blurred my vision. Even in death, Daddy was protecting me. He'd seen what Terrence had become, had known the possibility of this moment. "What does that mean?" "It means you can remove him from the will completely. The vinyl records, the toolbox. Everything. He'd get nothing." 6 months later, I stood in Daddy's house. My house, and finally felt like I could breathe. The renovations were almost complete. I'd used some of the insurance money to fix the roof, update the kitchen, repair the foundation issues we'd been ignoring for years. The rest I'd used to pay down my debts and start a small scholarship fund in Daddy's name for kids whose parents were battling cancer. Terrence had been convicted of assault, a misdemeanor with probation and anger management classes. Shanice had filed for divorce. Apparently, watching her husband punch his sister at a funeral home had been her breaking point. The will remained uncontested. Terrence got nothing, just as I'd decided that day in the funeral home, with witnesses present and my lawyer's papers ready to sign. People asked if I felt guilty. I didn't. I felt free. Aunt Carol visited often, bringing her famous pound cake and stories about Mama and Daddy from before Terrence and I were born. We'd laugh and cry and remember the good times when our family was whole. Sometimes I'd see Terrence's old friends around town, and they'd ask how he was doing. I'd tell them truthfully, "I don't know." We hadn't spoken since the trial. The hardest part wasn't the estrangement. It was the grief for the brother I'd lost long before Daddy died. The boy who'd protected me, who'd pushed my bike, who'd once promised to always look out for me. That Terrence was gone, replaced by a stranger whose greed had consumed everything good in him. I kept one thing of his. A photo from that 4th of July parade, Terrence grinning on Daddy's shoulders. It sits on my mantle, a reminder that love isn't obligation, that family is built through action, not blood. And that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is let go of someone who's already let go of you. Daddy taught me that. His final lesson, written in a will, spoken from beyond the grave. You don't owe anyone your peace. Not even family. If you've experienced family betrayal or complicated grief, You're not alone. Share your story in the comments. Sometimes just being heard helps us heal. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about boundaries, family, and finding strength in the hardest moments. Remember, you're allowed to choose peace even when it means letting go.